The desert sun beat down on the land as Abram and Lot stood side by side, watching over their growing camps. God had blessed them both with flocks, herds, and riches. But the land could no longer hold them together. Every day, tension rose. Their workers quarreled over pastures and water. What had once been unity was turning into unrest. But Abram, a man of peace, called for a solution. Rather than fight, he offered Lot the first choice of land. Lot looked around and saw the Jordan Valley, lush, green, like paradise. Without hesitation, he claimed it and moved toward the city of Sodom, a place known for its wickedness. Abram turned the other way, toward the less fertile hills of Canaan. It wasn't the best land, but Abram wasn't depending on what he saw. He was trusting the God who had promised. And after Lot departed, God spoke again. He told Abram to look in every direction. This land, God said, is yours and your descendants forever. So Abram moved his tents and built another altar. Even when Lot took what looked better, Abram chose faith over sight. Not long after Lot settled in Sodom, a war broke out. 4 powerful kings from the east attacked Sodom and its allies, conquering the cities and taking everything, including Lot and his family. When Abram heard what had happened, he didn't hesitate. With 318 trained men from his own household, he set out on a daring rescue mission. By night, under the stars, Abram attacked the enemy armies and defeated them. Lot was rescued, along with everyone else who had been taken. Abram returned home, not just a shepherd, but a warrior and a deliverer. On the way, a mysterious figure approached, Melchizedek, the king of Salem and priest of the Most High God. He blessed Abram with bread and wine and praised God for the victory. Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. But when the king of Sodom offered him the rest of the spoils, Abram refused. He didn't want anyone to say it was man who made him rich. His trust was in the Lord alone. But time passed. Still, no child. Sarai felt the weight of waiting. So she gave her servant Hagar to Abram, hoping to build a family through her. Hagar became pregnant, but instead of joy, it brought tension and bitterness. Sarai grew harsh, and Hagar fled into the wilderness, alone and afraid. And there, right in the dry, silent desert, God found her. He saw her pain. He heard her cries. God told her she was carrying a son, and that he would grow strong and free. His name would be Ishmael, meaning God hears. Overwhelmed, Hagar gave God a name, El Roi, the God who sees me. She returned no longer just a servant, but a woman who had encountered the living God in the wilderness. Years passed again. Ishmael grew into a young boy. Abram was now 99. Then God appeared again. This time, the message came with power and with names. Abram would now be called Abraham, the father of many nations. And Sarai would now be called Sarah, for she would become the mother of kings. God declared that Sarah, though 90, would give birth to a son. Abraham was stunned. He fell face down and laughed, not in disbelief, but in wonder. Could it really happen? God murmured at the laughter and said, "Your son will be called Isaac," which means he laughs. To seal the promise, God introduced circumcision, a sign of the everlasting covenant. Though the promise seemed delayed, it was never denied. In the heat of the day, while the world napped under the blazing desert sun, Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent. He was nearly 100 years old, but his eyes were sharp and full of peace. Then something stirred. Three travelers stood nearby, and without hesitation, Abraham rushed to greet them. He bowed low, offering rest, water, and a feast. Something in his spirit whispered, this visit was divine. Abraham said, "My lords, if I have found favor in your eyes, don't pass by. Let a little water be brought. Rest under this tree while I bring food." Abraham turned to Sarah, his wife, and said, "Quick, bake your finest bread." He ran to the herd and chose a tender calf. Servants moved swiftly. This wasn't just hospitality, this was honor. After they ate, one of the men turned and looked directly at Abraham. "Where's Sarah, your wife?" "She's in the tent," Abraham answered. God said to Abraham, "I will surely return to you next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Sarah laughed to herself, not out of joy, but disbelief. She was 90 years old, her body long past childbearing, her heart long tired of hope. But the Lord heard, and he said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord?" At the appointed time next year, Sarah will have a son. Sarah, suddenly nervous, stepped forward and said, "I did not laugh." But he replied gently, "Yes, you did." As they looked out across the plains, the Lord paused. Could he hide his plans from Abraham? No, because Abraham had been chosen to teach his children the way of the Lord. And so, shared it his heart. The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great. Their sin is very serious. I will go down and see for myself if what I've heard is true. Abraham stops in his tracks. A fire rises in his spirit, not of anger, but compassion. Then, for the first time in the Bible, a man interceded with God. Abraham said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you not spare it for their sake?" And God answered, "If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the whole place." But Abraham didn't stop there. He spoke again. "What if there are 45, or 40, or 30, 20, 10?" And each time the Lord answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." Now the sun begins to set. The three visitors depart. Abraham stands alone on the hill, watching. The Lord had spoken with him, as a friend speaks with a friend. Abraham returned to his tent. Sarah stayed inside, pondering what she had heard. And the promise hung in the air. A child would come. God's covenant would be fulfilled. Not through power or might, but through faith. Because nothing is too hard for the Lord. What did you learn from this story? Kindly share with us in the comment section.